A really important message and so brilliantly presented. And I think a good reminder as well to also be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. And we've got another brilliant presentation on social media coming up for you now. So Niamh, could you please introduce our next speakers?
Of course. So this next session is all about number one football media brand on TikTok. So how have they done it? Let's find out. Please welcome Eni and Brendon Shabani to the stage.
Is this working? This is working. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Eni. This is Brendon. As you can probably tell from the surname, we are brothers. So just firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to Future of Media for putting on an incredible 2 days. We've humbly been invited to talk about our journey, which, you know, as an entrepreneur, being a number one fan of your own brand, we can start with a pretty dramatic statement, how we built the number one football media brand on social. So we have been in this world for nearly a decade now, and we've seen a remarkable change in this space. But then we've also not seen a lot of change in this space. And so what we want to do today in the very limited time that we have is just talk about some of the things that we've picked up, and I guess a little bit of a recipe for success in some of the stuff that we do from an editorial standpoint, and then also from a branded content standpoint for campaigns. Yes, we're in the world of football, and yes, this applies to us, but quite honestly, a lot of these lessons and learnings apply to a global technology brand or an agency working with multiple brands. So yeah, a very brief background on us and our story, and I guess why we've got some authority on this topic. We have built a pretty sizable audience in a short amount of time. I grew up obviously with traditional media, with traditional broadcast platforms like BBC and ITV and Sky Sports. I was a football mad fan, I still am. But I think for us, what we noticed is as the youth audiences started to move more heavily towards the world of social, which there's been some really great insights on in previous presentations, the way this programming was being packaged up for the youth audience and the youth consumer was not really done in a way that I guess engages with an individual like Brendon. So we set about on this journey, and now we're at a stage where when you look at what we achieve from a platform perspective on a monthly, whether it's views or reach or followers, you know, the vanity metric, we're in a pretty good position. But the most important one that I'll highlight there is the demographic that we have. So we've built a really strong majority youth audience, which, as we know, is really difficult to maintain and sustain. And I guess we turned this into a full-time business where we're working with brands that we grew up with, brands that we love, including the club that I grew up supporting, Man United, who I used to get called a glory hunter for. I don't anymore. So yeah, I guess to understand a little bit about why we've got this authority in the space and why what we're doing is working, it's important to give you a glimpse on Brendon's story.
Thank you. Before we get into it, I'm conscious that this is a slide about me, and as great as it is for my ego, it's super important for everyone to understand where I've come from and why we're doing what we do today. But my story is the story of millions of other kids out there, where we're not the Jadon Sanchos, we're not the Bukayo Sakas, but we're the Brendon Shabanis that don't quite make it. And I think very early on I understood that I'm a massive consumer of the sport and I understood the game, but there wasn't content that was serving me in a way that I wanted it to, and the traditional media landscape wasn't engaging with me. I wasn't a fan of it, and if anything, it just felt super corporate and vanilla to me, and we thought social's changed and social has new rules, and there's no one better than me to tell that story to our audience and make sure that people really engage with our content, and we could create our own rules and our new rules to make sure that we're engaging our fans and making sure that they understand what we're trying to push and what the message is. And to be honest, looking back at these photos, it is super nostalgic. I no longer play football, but I make sure that I try and serve content as best as I can for people to relate and make sure that they're just enjoying what we put out.
And I guess there's a really random photo there of Nando's. It's not because we love Nando's, we do love Nando's, but that's actually where the business was conceived. So let's get into a little bit of the framework that we look at across our editorial strategy and then our branded content strategy. And as I did say, we do only have 10 minutes, and there is actually a lot of depth behind this and a range of questions that we always ask ourselves, whether it's, the storytelling that we do around Euros, where we came so close to bringing it home, or whether it's a branding campaign that we're looking at. Some of these things, individually, they're all exceptionally underrated, but together, when you start to actually put it all together and some of the stuff that you're doing, it's exceptionally powerful. So I'll pick out some examples that we've leveraged. So if I start with something like platform changes, we know that with the explosion of TikTok in 2019, 2020, the social space from a platform perspective is so exceptionally competitive. And what that means is platforms are shipping out changes way more than you'd ever expect. So a recent one that Instagram did was they moved carousels from 10 images maximum to 20 images maximum. What we then started doing across our editorial is literally just riding that wave. We also leveraged that for a branded campaign. And in both examples, the content just outperformed what it would have typically done. Using another example, which is asset style, we shoot with global athletes all the time, and what we've found, even now in some cases, is a brand might lock in a global tier one talent and spend the majority of that shoot focusing on, okay, am I making sure that I've got everything I need for my TVC? I need to make sure that it's perfect. When it goes out, everything needs to be perfect. But actually the 20 minutes that they spend in the run of show for social, and the 4 or 5 pieces of content that they grab with that athlete, once they put that on social, that will probably go further and wider than some of the, repurposing the TVC asset and putting that on social. So really it's just about understanding, Instagram, TikTok, and every other platform, you have to be native to these platforms in the asset and the sort of style of that asset when you put it out, and how much are you valuing that, and how much do you have a bespoke strategy around that? That's what's important. And, when we started this journey 7 or 8 years ago, we started to see some people do that. Of course, publishers had to do that because they look at analytics very, very closely. But brands, especially global brands, I guess you're starting to see some do it, but actually a lot still don't. Those are 2 examples that I can pick up on, Brendon.
Yeah, and like Annie mentioned, everything here is super important, and we try and make sure that we're doing everything on that list to try and build an audience and make our brand as successful as possible. But for me, I'd say tone of voice is becoming more and more important every day, and we're starting to realise that a brand's social media admin will now have their own personality and own tone of voice, and the consumer's really starting to relate to that, whether it's through what phrases they're using or what emojis they're using, which is really powerful. And tone of voice is always going to be important, of course, but some people are doing a really great job of it. Is someone like a Duolingo, and I feel like they're always going viral on my LinkedIn or on my socials, but their admin is just really, really honing in on their tone of voice and making sure that what they put out is super relatable and people really feel like it could be their friend, which is super powerful. And another one is Adidas, who is a bit closer to home and we obviously work with, but Adidas's captions are all lowercase letters, and it might not seem like a big thing, but it just kind of makes them look like the cool kid on the block, which is different to what most brands are doing and powerful in their own right. But like Annie mentioned, it's about staying consistent, and they've been doing this for years. So in the last year, people have started realising it, but they've stayed true to their audience, they've stayed native to their own voice, and they've made sure that through everything, being consistent through their tone of voice is the best way to grow and make sure that your consumers engage with your content. And some examples of what we think has performed well this year, and obviously we've got to be biased and put one of our own piece of work in here, but going back to what was on the previous list, the DMing one, it was super authentic to our audience, and we thought we want to make sure that we reply to every single DM that our audience and our consumer reaches out to us for. And we got a question from our audience, and they said, I really want advice on how to make it to the next level. What can you give me? And although I came from the game, I never made it. And I thought there's a great story we could tell here to bridge a gap between the household names now that grew up on rising ballers like Jamal Musiala, Garnacho, Kobe Mainu, and grassroots and community. And that's what we did. And we told us super authentic stories. We told the story, and it was super engageable and shareable content, and it went as far and as wide as possible, which is what you want most content to do. And I think above everything, it had incredible impact on our community, and it was super easy, digestible content that was social only. So that's one of many examples on there, and I'm sure that, to be honest, I know what One Ennies is because he always bangs on about it in the office. But
yeah, I really like the Matalan one. I don't know if you guys saw that one. That one was hilarious. We were talking about it quite a lot in our office, but I think with all of these, and I'll use the Matalan one as an example, when we go back to that framework of some of the criteria to look out for. So the Matalan one was Matt and Alan, who worked at Matalan and work at Matalan, and this asset was dropped on their socials about a week after Marks and Spencer's did the Spencer Matthews, Mark Wright piece of content, which was their best performing piece of content. So the Matt and Alan one, when we go back to the framework of asset style, it's super lo-fi. When we go back to the talent selection, it's super authentic. When we go back to the execution of it, it's just super relatable. And I think when you look at how well it performed, I think we clocked that it was their best piece of performing content on social platforms for that year. And the cost of that asset, I mean, would have been fractional to other stuff that they would put out. But again, there's really brave strategies that global brands can adopt for these platforms that will tap into that youth audience. And what I'll end it on, because I'm conscious of time, what I'll end it on is when you think about social platforms and algorithms nowadays, it's more meritocratic than ever before. Everyone has a chance of cutting through. When you think about the For You page, when you think about the shareability of content, if you create something that is actually gold dust, it will go far and wide without needing to resort to paid media. So yeah, that's what I'll leave it on. So thank you so much for your time. We're going to be hovering around if anyone wants to talk social, which we can talk about for all day long. But yeah, thank you.